Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Iranian nuclear development and the difference of opinion between the U.S. and Israel. Thanksgiving comes next week, and Meredith Gansman helps you prepare. The new mayor of Jersey City is Jewish, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. As the United States and Iran appear closer to an initial deal on nuclear development, Israel is expressing further upset. Secretary of State John Kerry is reportedly working on a deal that would allow Iran to continue to develop non-weaponized nuclear capacity. In its initial stages, the deal would allow for inspections of Iranian nuclear facilities in exchange for lifting some sanctions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want a deal that allows Iran to retain any nuclear capacity and told CNN on Sunday,
"It's a bad deal, an exceedingly bad deal."
U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power defended the approach of the deal.
This is a regime we do not trust any more than the Israelis trust this regime. So to imagine down the line being able to go from 0 to 60 without some kind of first step, I think is unrealistic. This would allow us to gauge whether or not what they say is what they mean and whether they're prepared to follow through.
Meantime, the U.S. is also trying to broker a deal on Israeli-Palestinian peace, and joining the U.S. negotiating team is a longtime figure in the discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, David Makovsky. Makovsky is to be a senior advisor to the head of the U.S. team, Martin Indyk. Makovsky will be departing the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, where he was a distinguished fellow. Hiring Makovsky means that Indyk now has an 8-person team handling the peace process, which is seen as a sign of the administration's commitment to seeing the process through to completion. But while Israel sorts out these foreign policy matters, criminal charges against yet another Israeli government official were revealed this week, this time against former Chief Rabbi Yonah Metzger. Metzger was arrested on charges of fraud and receiving bribes and other illicit payments, as well as breach of the public trust. Metzger was denied bail for a period of 9 days because the presiding judge feared Metzger might interfere with the investigation. The police representative claimed that the payments allegedly received by Metzger amount to millions of shekels in his decade-long tenure as chief rabbi. The indictment claims the payments were in exchange for Metzger directing certain parties to make charitable donations and for, quote, utilizing his authority as chief rabbi in a variety of different incidents. But Israel made more positive headlines around the globe for the work of Israeli aid workers in the Philippines responding to Typhoon Haiyan. An Israeli field hospital has delivered more than a dozen babies. The first one delivered there was given the name Israel by her parents. The Israeli team has 125 members, including 22 doctors and 15 nurses, and has been examining several hundred patients a day. But moving on to an episode of celebration, millions of Jews around the world will be celebrating Hanukkah next week. For American Jews, this year's holiday is particularly special, coinciding with Thanksgiving. It's the only time in your lifetime you'll see this convergence, so Meredith Gansman explored all the many special ways to celebrate the double holiday so many are calling Thanksgiving.
Oh Hanukkah, you're dumber than I remember. Did you forget you got no business starting in November?
Feathers are about to fly, because in case you haven't heard, this year, the second night of Hanukkah, Thursday, November 28th, falls on Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving, aka the best holiday ever, and it won't be celebrated again for approximately another 77,000 years. And I have all the treats you'll need to celebrate this momentous holiday, including this, the Menorchi. Invented by 9-year-old Brooklyn native Asher Weintraub, it is indeed a menorah shaped like a turkey.
We just tried designing a turkey, then put a base on it, and put cups behind it.
After a few Menorchi prototypes, the Weintraub family raised over $48,000 for production on Kickstarter. I met Asher at the Jewish Museum, the sole retailer of the Menorchi in New York City. And while you're putting the Menorchi on your Thanksgiving list, Asher provided me with a list of his own.
And maybe a PS4.
And maybe a PS4. Asher's mom and dad. I think we can, okay? I think we can make that happen.
But when it comes to turkey-shaped menorahs, there's also an edible version that we checked out back at TJC Studios. David Levine from Illinois Nut and Candy has brought some very special treats for Thanksgiving.
We created a new mold for a large menorah, which became a Menorchi, as well as the Menorchis that are big, which do not ship, We have small Menorcas for everybody.
Mini Menorca.
Mini Menorca lollipops. We have chocolate dreidels. These are actually dreidels you could play with at the table.
They say don't play with your food.
This is one food you could play with. You could spin it.
Once in a lifetime.
And you could win with it. And you have the chocolate Hanukkah gelt as well. We also have the bigger dreidels, which are both for decoration. They don't spin as well.
But they're tasty.
Very tasty.
Well, I now can show you a few of the things that we also have for Thanksgiving. Look at all of these cool t-shirts from Modern Tribe. 8 days of lights, liberty, and latke. And to that I say, amen. We have special chocolate Thanksgiving gelt from Foiled Again. Gobble Gobble gelt. Also, I really love Gobble Tove. I've just been saying it to everybody. People haven't fully caught on with it yet, but Gobble Tove. Again, a once-in-a-lifetime Thanksgiving scarf with your friend in mind, the Menorca.
We've covered menorahs, chocolate, and more. But now for a Thanksgiving twist on another Hanukkah staple, it's time to make the donuts, or sufganiyot as they're called in Hebrew.
So Mark, Israel, and I at Donut Plant are just having a little coffee talk today, right?
Coffee talk.
Right. We're here to talk about very special Thanksgiving.
My grandmother used to make potato latkes
Right.
for Hanukkah, and then my grandfather used to make the donuts in the bakery. So I'm just kind of carrying on that in my own way. Thanksgiving you eat a lot, and Hanukkah
You eat a lot too.
You eat a lot that's like with oil,
Right. Right.
So we're in the business of oil, Donut Plant. So we got some donuts here, vanilla glaze with blackberry jam, and butter glaze with blackberry jam.
Oh, I like the sound of that. There's just one more stop on our tour of Thanksgiving treats.
Zucker Bakery in Manhattan's East Village has something for Thanksgiving that I've never seen before. It's a turkey-filled sufganiyot, and I'll show you how it's made right inside.
Melissa Feit, co-owner and baker at Zucker Bakery, has 4 new donut flavors for Thanksgiving: cranberry turkey, turkey gravy donuts, cranberry donuts, and sweet potato donuts filled with marshmallow. For more on these Thanksgiving specialties, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Jewish politicians are succeeding in many new locales, and the new mayor of Jersey City is one example. Christian Needon interviews him.
He's the mayor of New Jersey's second-largest city and no stranger to a fight, both on the battlefield and in city politics. Steve Fulop was elected Jersey City's 49th mayor this year, the city's first Jewish mayor in 40 years. This after 8 years spent in city council, where he was the youngest ever elected member, and 4 years of service in the U.S. Marine Corps before that. Now, at age 36, Fulop has unseated an incumbent mayor and begins what he hopes will be a new era of transparency in an office that has long been stained by a reputation for corruption and machine politics. TJC recently paid a visit to Mayor Fulop and discussed how his Jewish upbringing and education influenced his public service career.
I went to a serious Orthodox school up until 8th grade. It was just the one that was convenient. So we spent half the day with, Mishnah, Gemara, that sort of thing, and then half the day secular English education. So it was a long day, but, if you think about kind of some of the principles that I have today and service, a lot of that is rooted in the Jewish education that I had when I was younger.
Not surprising, as Fulop is the grandchild of Holocaust survivors and said his family's post-war American experience played a part in his joining the Marines.
I probably view my service in the military and today as a partial payment for citizenship. And I'm thankful every day for the opportunities that this country afforded my family. And I know, and I think that my parents and grandparents recognize that it's only in this country that you can be rewarded for persistence and hard work like no other country in the world.
That persistence has taken Fulop to Jersey City's highest office and a bright political future. But the moral reputation of the mayor of Jersey City has come into question repeatedly over its history. No more so than during the Democratic machine-driven 30-year tenure of its 30th mayor, Frank Hague, and up through Fulop's predecessor, Jeremiah Healy, whose administration was caught up in Operation Bid Rig, the largest FBI corruption sting in New Jersey history, which led to the arrests of 44 public officials and rabbis around the state. including Jersey City's deputy mayor. Fulop said he's out to change how people think of the mayor of Jersey City.
We're trying to do everything as transparent as possible, to be as open with information as humanly possible, and I recognize that it's not going to change overnight. You know, there's nothing I can do about the fact that for decades and decades you've had mayors that have been arrested and council people that have been arrested, and we have to live with that history, but it doesn't mean that we can't change it, and that is really part of the mission of this administration.
To see more from Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Finally, Jewish women chained in their marriages because their husbands refuse to give them a religious divorce or get are a big topic these days, and none more so than Gital Dodelson, a woman who revealed her story to the media in recent weeks. Newsweek senior editor Abigail Jones explored the Dodelson case and the larger issue of so-called agunot in a large feature, and she stopped by TJC Studios to talk about it. So what attracted you to this story?
You know, the story is about a 25-year-old woman who has a young son. Her name is Gital Dodelson. She has been struggling for over 3 years to divorce her husband. This is a story out of the Orthodox Jewish community. Divorce is difficult in any situation. In this community, it can sometimes be more complex. And she took her story public in an article in the New York Post last week. And there was a line that stuck with me. She said something to the effect of, "After 3 days of marriage, I knew I made a terrible mistake." And as a young woman, I read that and I felt sad for her and for her situation, but at the same time, I knew there was a lot going on behind her struggle to divorce her husband, and so I wanted to understand what was at work.
Right, and in this case specifically, it's the Orthodox Jewish communal approach of having what's called a get, which is a Jewish writ of divorce that must be delivered from the husband to the wife to effect the divorce, and if that doesn't happen, they're not divorced.
In the Orthodox Jewish community, men have all of the power when it comes to divorce. A woman can get a civil divorce, but within the Jewish community, she is not considered divorced under Jewish law until her husband willfully gives her a get. Without it, she is an agunah, a chained woman. She cannot date or marry in her community. If she does, she is deemed an outcast. Any children she has with that new husband are deemed illegitimate. And almost all of the people I interviewed for my article said that get refusal is a form of domestic abuse.
Overall, I think you're trying to be an objective journalist and so on and so forth, but how do you feel about this story? How do you feel about this issue?
You know, I feel sorry and frustrated for Gital, but for any woman in a situation where they are married to a man they want to divorce, and they cannot because he is refusing to give her the get that she needs. Gital is a woman who wants to get divorced and yet remain inside of the Orthodox Jewish community. That's why the get is so important. I spoke to another woman, Frady Reese, who grew up in the ultra-Orthodox community in Brooklyn, was married at a very young age, over a decade later decided, I want to get divorced, obtained a civil divorce, and then said, you know what, I don't want to get, I'm out of here. And she left the community. She told me that rabbis didn't know what to do with her. So that's another alternative, but only if you're ready to leave the community.
You can see the full interview with Abigail Jones in the interviews category under TJC Original Series on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. That's all for this week from all of us here at the Jewish Channel. Be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu.